4th Coalition Show. This is the December 9th series of the April 4th Coalition Show. You're stuck with me hosting, but luckily we have Mike and Susan with us, and we're gonna go through this. And thank goodness for Joanne working behind the scenes and making this show possible, and everybody at Northern Berkshire Community Television. We're the April 4th Coalition Show. Our mission statement is we are for workers' rights and collective bargaining rights. We are against tax breaks for the rich and corporations who ship our jobs overseas. We endorse all the articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but as our custom is, we're going to do Article 23. So, number 1, everyone has the right to work, the free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and protection against unemployment.
Number 2, everyone, without any discrimination, has the right to equal pay for equal work.
Number 3, everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for himself or herself and his family or her family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection.
Number 4, everyone has the right to form and join trade unions for the protection of his or her interests.
Well, thank you very much. We want to recognize that sign behind us, poverty is the enemy, and we're going to delve right into poverty. We have a video that tries to break down poverty. Not only, poverty is not just one thing, they break it down into several different types of poverty. So let's take a look and look at the first section of this video.
Absolute poverty. Imagine you're playing a video game with different modes to choose from. The absolute poverty mode, however, cranks the difficulty to insane, where the challenge isn't defeating a boss, but finding food before your health bar hits 0. Forget about shooting enemies or slaying dragons, because your real adversaries are hunger, dehydration, and bad weather. If you fail to snag some clean water or shelter, it's game over. Welcome to the real-life survival horror mode we call absolute poverty. This economic status means not having the bare essentials to meet your basic needs. We are not talking about skipping your morning latte or not upgrading to the latest iPhone. We are talking about not having enough food to keep going, no safe water to drink, no roof over your head, and 0 access to basic healthcare or education. To put it into perspective, global organizations like the United Nations and the World Bank use a specific income threshold to define this level of poverty. If you're living on less than $2.15 a day, you're in absolute poverty. Absolute poverty is more common in poorer countries, but you can still find it in the US and other developed nations. Meanwhile, there are different factors, such as political chaos and economic problems, that cause it. Still, the result is the same, living on the edge of survival as if every day is a high-stakes, no-respawn game where you're always just a hair away from losing. Subsistence poverty. Let's say you're poor, but not counting crumbs on your plate poor. You're surviving on the edge of possibility, where one wrong move feels like it might lead to an unplanned trip to rock bottom. This is subsistence poverty, the kind of life where you're a master of stretching resources so thin they could as dental floss. It's a level of poverty where you've got just enough to get by. You eat enough to avoid fainting, find shelter that keeps the wind from slapping you awake, and wear clothing that covers you more out of obligation than style. Luxuries are a distant fantasy, and even basic comforts are out of reach. Life in this situation is not about dreaming of tropical vacations or the latest gadget.
Well, that was one section. Let's go on to the next section and see.
Making it through another day without feeling like you're losing a reality game show based on survival. Every penny is accounted for, as if your wallet has a suspicious accountant peeking over your shoulder. Food is often whatever you can afford or grow yourself, depending if you have a green thumb developed by survival instincts. Your meals are designed for survival, not enjoyment, so ramen noodles have become your lifeline and nemesis. Housing is not about charm or coziness, but more about whether the roof leaks less than your bank account does. Education and healthcare are less like opportunities and more like the VIP section of a club. Your child might leave school to help support the family, and a minor illness can escalate into a full-blown disaster simply because there's nothing left for a doctor's visit or a bottle of medicine. The worst part is that it's a vicious cycle. When all your energy is spent surviving today, planning for tomorrow feels as impossible as taming a snake. You're trapped, running on a treadmill that seems to speed up when you catch your breath. Every step forward is matched by life dragging you 2 steps back. Situational poverty. Situational poverty is where you live a regular life before life throws a curveball that knocks all your finances off course. It's more of an immediate and sudden crisis caused by specific events. Imagine having a Ferrari that breaks down in the middle of nowhere without food, shelter, or people to help you. That's what it's like to be situationally poor. This can be caused by anything drastic and sudden. You're cruising through life well enough, saving a bit and feeling stable, but a sudden major event happens, leaving you with nothing. This could be a serious illness, a natural disaster, or your wife divorcing you for another man and taking 90% of your assets. Suddenly, everything starts to crumble like a house of blocks. You're left scrambling to make ends meet. What makes situational poverty stand out is that it often hits people who are used to being financially stable. They might have had decent jobs, savings, and a comfortable life, but these things can vanish faster than a slice of cake at a party. It's not just about losing money, but also about the shock of going from buying organic kale without flinching to debating whether to pay the electric bill or stock up on canned soup. Imagine trying to figure out how to make rent while simultaneously dealing with a car that decided to become a very expensive lawn ornament. The good news is that situational poverty is usually temporary. Most people bounce back after months of sheer panic and creative budgeting. For example, during the recent pandemic, millions lost financial footing because of sudden layoffs and business closures. Moderate poverty. When you're moderately poor, it's like you're saying, I'm alive, but I'm not okay. It's essentially a situation where you can eat, sleep, and buy clothes, but just barely. You're surviving, but it's far from comfortable, as you live in hard mode. Think of it like constantly being one unexpected bill away from a financial disaster. You can afford groceries, pay for a modest apartment, and send your kids to school, but one broken appliance or a minor illness is enough to send your finances spiraling. It's like building a house of cards and sneezing at the wrong moment. A single unpaid sick day or an unexpected price hike can make you rethink if you really need to eat 3 square meals daily. Moderate poverty is defined internationally as earning between $3.65 and $6.85 daily. While that might cover the basics in some areas, it is no backstage pass to comfort. You might manage a meal, a ride to work, and a place to sleep, but anything extra is wishful thinking. Saving for emergencies is not an option because you are busy figuring out how to make pennies stretch like rubber bands. Education and healthcare are technically available, but their quality can leave a lot to be desired. Schools might be so overcrowded that kids learn more about survival strategies than algebra. And healthcare often involves waiting so long that the illness gets bored and escalates just to keep things interesting. It is better than having nothing, but it feels like winning a prize broken out of the box. Moderate poverty feels like living on the edge of just enough. You're not starving or sleeping on the streets, but every step feels like walking on a tightrope over a pit of financial chaos. Generational poverty. You're conversing with friends, and they start boasting about what they inherited from their family. One talks about the classic car he got from his grandfather, while another boasts about the beach house his dad got him. Feeling left out in the conversation because you don't have anything to boast about, you say, I inherited poverty from my dad, just like how he inherited poverty from his dad. That's essentially what generational poverty is. You've probably heard about generational wealth, where families pass down riches like a financial hot potato. Generational poverty is like playing hot potato, but the potato is rotten and smells funny. It's when you're poor because your parents were poor, and they were poor because their parents were poor. It's a family tree, except the leaves are just unpaid bills. Think of it this way. Poverty in the family is like inheriting your grandma's secret recipe book, but instead of warm, gooey cookies, it's filled with recipes for struggle. Ingredients include a dash of low-paying jobs, a pinch of limited education, and a cup of missed opportunities. You know, the kind of recipe no one's pinning on Pinterest. You've probably heard the saying, it's not your fault if you're born poor, but it's your fault if you die poor. Inspirational, sure, but breaking out of generational poverty is like trying to do a magic trick without a wand. Imagine growing up in a household where everyone's barely scraping by, and the neighborhood is a live-action version of survival mode. It's like being handed a treasure map that doesn't make sense. Take education, for example. If your parents couldn't afford college, chances are neither can you. It's like someone cuts the ladder of success in half and hands you the bottom part. Or if your community's version of career goals is juggling 3 odd jobs just to pay the rent, it's hard to imagine doing anything else. You're stuck running on a hamster wheel without exposure to new skills or a chance at a good diploma. Urban poverty. Let's say you live in the middle of a huge city, complete with skyscrapers, bright lights, and celebrities. You think you've made it just because you live in a place like New York or Tokyo, but those huge buildings, corporate opportunities, and nice cars are all out of reach. Welcome to urban poverty, where dreams are tall, but your budget isn't. Urban poverty happens when people in cities struggle to make ends meet because a big city equals higher cost of living. Sure, being in a nice city with all the lights and buildings sounds great until you realize you're stuck in a crumbling apartment on the outskirts while the rich folks sip lattes in the business district. It's like being at a concert but hearing the music from the parking lot. Cities are supposed to be places of opportunity, but the twist is that everything costs an arm and a leg. Rent is absurdly high for apartments the size of closets, and finding a job that pays enough to cover it feels like a game of hide and seek, where the paycheck is always hiding. The challenges don't stop there. Housing in urban poverty is often overcrowded or unsafe, with families squeezed into spaces so small even their dreams are claustrophobic. Clean water and sanitation can feel like mythical luxuries, and health risks are piling up like your laundry on a chair. Education is marketed as the golden ticket out of poverty, but for many kids, schools are either packed like sardine cans or located on the other side of Narnia. Structural poverty. Structural poverty is like playing a board game where the rules were already rigged. Someone keeps taking your pieces, and every dice roll is against you. You're not losing because you made poor choices or not working hard enough. Instead, it's about the system being stacked against certain groups of people from the start. This type of poverty happens when society plays the ultimate prank by stacking the deck against people, no matter how hard they try. Imagine being told to climb a ladder only to find out your ladder is actually a slide. For instance, people born into low-income families often find the good stuff, like quality education and healthcare, is stashed behind a members-only curtain. The result is a vicious cycle where generations of people are stuck in poverty, like being in a video game where you're forever stuck on level 1, while others zip by with cheat codes and unlimited lives. Structural poverty has a list of villains longer than a superhero movie. Discrimination, lousy education systems, unaffordable housing, and jobs that pay peanuts all play a part. Even if you work 3 jobs and skip vacations for a decade, it can still feel like you're treading water in a pool that keeps getting deeper. Educational poverty. Imagine you're baking a cake but don't have the recipe, half the ingredients, or even the oven preheated. That's what educational poverty feels like for millions of people. It's not just about being poor financially, but more about not having access to quality education or resources to learn effectively. And just like a botched cake, the results can be disappointing. Educational poverty is when someone doesn't get enough education or the right kind to thrive. Picture a classroom with no textbooks, trained teachers, or roof. Basically, it's a sunbathing club that calls itself a school. Trying to learn there is like diving into a pool with no water. But educational poverty doesn't stop at the school gates because it's a gift that keeps giving. Families without good education might find homework time turning into a family-wide guessing game. Communities face a future that looks less like a bright sunrise and more like a flickering light bulb. The cycle repeats, like a bad sequel to a movie that shouldn't have been made in the first place. Globally, over 260 million kids are out of school. That's equal to an entire country full of uneducated people. Even kids who do make it to school often miss out on learning essential skills, like reading or math, thanks to broken systems. The effects are as dramatic as attempting to cross a broken bridge to a brighter future, and there isn't even a safety net ready to catch you when you fall. Working poverty. You've got a job, maybe even 2 or 3, but your bank account still looks like it's on a diet. Rent, food, and other basics keep eating up your paycheck faster than you can say savings.
Okay, we're going to go right to the next one, too. I think we'll finish it up.
It's what we call working poverty, when people are working, often full-time or more, but still can't cover their basic needs. You might be wondering how this is even possible. After all, work is supposed to help you escape poverty. In theory, yes, but reality is out here rewriting the rules. Low-wage jobs pay so little that even a full-time schedule won't cover the essentials. Toss in part-time gigs, unpredictable hours, or the occasional surprise paycheck that's lighter than you expected, and you've got a financial roller coaster without a safety harness. And don't hold your breath for benefits like health insurance or paid leave, because most of these jobs act like they've never even heard of them. Then there's the cost of living. In some areas, rent alone can eat up your paycheck like it's on an all-you-can-eat buffet. That leaves crumbs for groceries, transportation, or the occasional coffee splurge. Combine that with unexpected expenses like medical bills or car repairs, and you have a recipe for constant financial stress. Working poverty also has a ripple effect. Parents in this situation often struggle to afford childcare, meaning they can't work extra hours or return to school to climb the career ladder. Meanwhile, the stress of constantly juggling bills can weigh on your mental and physical health, leaving you feeling like the lead in a tragic soap opera. Relative poverty. Let's say you and your friends are in a fancy restaurant with many dishes. Someone orders lobster, while another one goes for an A5 Wagyu steak. Then there's you, only ordering fried chicken because that's all your budget allows. You're happily munching away, but as you glance at their plates, you realize they're eating meals fit for royalty while you're eating food for peasants. That's relative poverty served hot. Relative poverty isn't about having absolutely nothing, but it's more like playing Monopoly and realizing everyone else is buying hotels while you're stuck mortgaging your house. It's a measure that shifts depending on where and when you live. In a wealthy country, being relatively poor might mean struggling to afford Wi-Fi, a smartphone, or a car, basically the modern-day survival kit. People might just think you're showing off with all that fancy technology in another time or place. To put it in context, governments set a poverty threshold as if they're drawing a line in the sand to say, below here, life's a struggle. It's usually a percentage of the median income. So if the median income is $50,000 and you're earning $25,000, congrats, you've won the title of relatively poor. You're not really poor, but your lifestyle might involve more ramen noodles and fewer Michelin stars than the average person. What makes relative poverty tricky is that it's like trying to win a race where the finish line keeps moving. If everyone's income goes up but yours only gets a polite nudge, you might feel poorer even with more money in your pocket. Even with more money in your pocket, the standard of living around you keeps sprinting ahead, making relative poverty the ultimate master of hide and seek.
That was a lot of information in a short amount of time. But it covered poverty. What did you think? What stuck out, if anything, in that about poverty?
Now, if you don't have money to begin with, sometimes, you're not going to see it again. You know, it's just, some people, back in my day, there were a lot of factory jobs. So you could always get something to work with for the most part. Nowadays, it's a little bit tougher.
Right. How about you, Susan?
Well, I think poverty, as far as having absolutely nothing and living on the streets in cold weather and just striving to not even get, clean water is in the United States of America just doesn't make you feel, that good about the country sometimes when they're spending money other places, when they should be taking care of the very poor and giving them opportunities. And there are things out there to get opportunities, but you got to know where.
Yeah, and the knowing of where and how, leads us to the next section, because a lot of times people who are in poverty are powerless. And that's why they remain in poverty.
Right.
Because they don't have the power to change the world around them and their situation. So we got another video, and this one's about power. It describes what power is, and I found it very informative. So let's take a look at that and see if we can combine the two after we see both.
Every day of your life, you move through systems of power that other people made. Do you sense them? Do you understand power? Do you realize why it matters? Power is something we're often uncomfortable talking about. That's especially true in civic life, how we live together in community. In a democracy, power is supposed to reside with the people, period. Any further talk about power and who really has it seems a little dirty, maybe even evil. But power is no more inherently good or evil than fire or physics. It just is. It governs how any form of government works. It determines who gets to determine the rules of the game. So learning how power operates is key to being effective, being taken seriously, and not being taken advantage of. In this lesson, we'll look at where power comes from, how it's exercised, and what you can do to become more powerful in public life. Let's start with a basic definition. Power is the ability to make others do what you would have them do. Of course, this plays out in all arenas of life, from family to the workplace to our relationships. Our focus is on the civic arena, where power means getting a community to make the choices and to take the actions that you want. There are 6 main sources of civic power. First, there's physical force and a capacity for violence. Control of the means of force, whether in the police or a militia, is power at its most primal. A second core source of power is wealth. Money creates the ability to buy results and to buy almost any other kind of power. The third form of power is state action, government. This is the use of law and bureaucracy to compel people to do or not do certain things. In a democracy, for example, we the people theoretically give government its power through elections. In a dictatorship, state power emerges threat of force, not the consent of the governed. The fourth type of power is social norms, or what other people think is okay. Norms don't have the centralized machinery of government. They operate in a softer way, peer-to-peer. But they can certainly make people change behavior and even change laws. Think about how norms around marriage equality today are evolving. The fifth form of power is ideas. An idea, individual liberty, say, or racial equality, can generate boundless amounts of power if it motivates enough people to change their thinking and actions. And so the sixth source of power is numbers, lots of humans. A vocal mass of people creates power by expressing collective intensity of interest and by asserting legitimacy. Think of the Arab Spring or the rise of the Tea Party. Crowds count. These are the 6 main sources of power, what power is. So now, let's think about how power operates. There are 3 laws of power worth examining. Law number 1, power is never static. It's always either accumulating or decaying in the civic arena. So if you aren't taking action, you're being acted upon. Law number 2, power is like water. It flows like a current through everyday life. Politics is the work of harnessing that flow in a direction you prefer. Policymaking is an effort to freeze and perpetuate a particular flow of power. Policy is power frozen. Law number 3, power compounds. Power begets more power, and so does powerlessness. The only thing that keeps law number 3 from leading to a situation where only one person has all the power is how we apply laws 1 and 2. What rules do we set up so that a few people don't accumulate too much power and so they can't enshrine their privilege in policy? That's the question of democracy. And you can see each of these laws at work in any news story. Low-wage workers organize to get higher pay. Oil companies push to get a big pipeline approved. Gay and lesbian couples seek the legal right to marry. Urban parents demand school vouchers. You may support these efforts or not. Whether you get what you want depends on how adept you are with power. Which brings us finally to what you can do to become more powerful in public life. Here, it's useful to think in terms of literacy. Your challenge is to learn how to read power and write power. To read power means to pay attention to as many texts of power as you can. I don't mean books only. I mean seeing society as a set of texts. Don't like how things are in your campus or city or country? Map out who has what kind of power, arrayed in what systems. Understand why it turned out this way, who's made it so, and who wants to keep it so. Study the strategies others in such situations used. Frontal attack or indirection. Coalitions or charismatic authority. Read so you may write. To write power requires first that you believe you have the right to write, to be an author of change. You do. As with any kind of writing, you learn to express yourself, speak up in a voice that's authentic, organize your ideas, then organize other people. practice consensus building, practice conflict. As with writing, it's all about practice. Every day you have a chance to practice, in your neighborhood and beyond. Set objectives, then bigger ones. Watch the patterns, see what works. Adapt, repeat. This is citizenship. In this short lesson, we've explored where civic power comes from, how it works, and what you can do to exercise it. One big question remaining is the why of power. Do you want power to benefit everyone or only you? Are your purposes pro-social or anti-social? This question isn't about strategy, it's about character. And that's another set of lessons. But remember this, power plus character equals a great citizen, and you have the power to be one.
Wow. That was interesting, I thought.
Very interesting.
Did you have something that stuck out to you on that, on discussion of power and citizenship?
There was something, and then it left me.
How about you, Mike?
You know what hit me about the program?
About the power, yeah.
That if you have back in the 60s and 70s, you could see more of it. Because what they used to do right here in the city of North Adams, they used to import their workers from different countries upon occasion. And I know this, I used to go up there, and one time one of them offered me if I wanted to enjoy the snake, whatever the heck they call it. And I told no, thank you, I didn't need that. It was at the Phoenix Hotel. We used to import labor back then.
Yeah, so there were the people that were in power imported workers. What were you thinking of?
I just
Sure
had it
did.
until you said something.
It's all right. It's all right. But
That's awful.
But I think the important thing is citizenship. And do we want a society that allows poverty to exist in all its forms?
I think the thing is problem solving is one of the things that's very important, especially if you come from a family that you didn't inherit a lot, but a cardboard in your shoes, and so I had to get out of the poverty that I was in, and you have to know where, and sometimes somebody gives out the helping hand, and that's all you need to start you in that, down that road to success. And, but anyways, go ahead and take.
Yeah, well, I think that would help as long as you're not stuck in a structural power situation. Say that, if, just that would help if you had all the opportunities that everyone else had. That little helping hand could put you over. But if there are other structural issues, like that you can't overcome without society's help, making those changes. We need to organize our society in such a way that there's a safety net, that no one lives in abject poverty. And we have enough wealth in the community or in the nation that we should be able to take care of everyone's needs, and still others could be rich, but they could still share what they have. So thank you. We're getting to the end of the show. We'd like to say power to the people, because that's one of the solutions that we see for eliminating poverty, and
Yes.
is put the power in the hands of the people.
Exactly.
Put the hand power to the people.
Power to the people.
It is.
Thank you.
They said back in the 50s and 60s, we used to import labor.
There's power in the factory, power in the land, power in the hand of the worker. But it all amounts to nothing if together we don't stand. There is power in our union. Now the lessons of the pastoral world with workers' blood, the strikes of the bosses we must pay for. From the cities and the farmlands to trenches full